Kevin Zay. Why is it that some people can't just recognize hypnagogia for what it is instead of believing they've been visited by ghosts, abducted by aliens, or had some sort of vision/slash premonition? Does it have something to do with people's family history or their culture, or is it more of a psychological issue? Also, how prevalent are alien abduction or visitation stories in Scientology? Okay, hypnagogia. Now, I might be mispronouncing that for some folks out there. I looked it up actually, so I think I'm saying it right. It's kind of an odd word, hypnagogia, hypnagogia, referred to as also hypnagogic hallucinations. The experience of the transitional state. Here's what it is: the transitional state from wakefulness, from being awake to going to sleep. There's that period in between there where you're not asleep, but you're not totally awake. You're seeing, hearing things, maybe that happens during this period. There are hallucinations that exist only up here that people experience, and before they get to sleep. It's also a word that's used to describe the sleep to wakefulness portion, but they also have another word for that, which is hypnopompic. So you can take your choice on that latter part, but I think we'll mostly concentrate on the falling asleep part. And Kevin, you asked about people having these various visions and how come they can't just recognize that. Well, this is both cultural and psychological. Culturally, you have a long history across all cultures in the world about dreams, about your mythology or mysticism or mystic beliefs surrounding dreams and dream state and the significance of them. And we have put a lot of stock in what these visions and ideas and things we hear and see or feel or sense while we are in these semi-conscious states. Um, and it's fascinating, actually. I mean, the study of all of this. But at the end of the day, what you're really doing is sort of explaining, firing off of neurons in the brain that produce these very, very realistic sensations. I mean, if you think about it for a second, everything you see, everything you hear, everything that you sense or experience goes through this mass, this little jelly-like mass in your head called your brain. And when you're really, quote unquote, hearing something, when there is actually an external stimuli causing your ear to vibrate or your eye to experience, the light waves going in there and being interpreted, that causes certain neurons to fire off that give you the experience that you have. And in these states, dream states, unconscious states, sleep states, whatever, the same patterns of neurons are firing off the same way as though there was an external stimuli. So for all intents and purposes, these things they're recreated physical events that you really do have a very, very hard time differentiating between these things, between a hallucination of the sound of a train, your memory of the sound of a train, and the real sound of a train. I mean, these things can be very, very easily confused, especially, like I said, if a person is going into this semi-conscious sleep state. Now, that's about as much expertise as I can bring to this. Okay, that's about as far down that rabbit hole that I can speak intelligently about it. But the point of what I'm saying is that these things feel real. And for people who don't go looking to the science or going to look to figure out the biology of it or the neuroscience of it or whatever, people aren't that interested. If they see or hear or feel something, that's it. It was real. I don't need to question it anymore. I experienced it, and that's how it is. And you see this all the time. So to that degree, it's also psychological, right? Because we don't want to think that we're imagining things. We don't want to think we're out of our mind. We don't want to think all these things that would basically lead in the direction of us being insane or not fully rational, right? We're all rational creatures. So you bump up against, that kind of thing. And of course, then comes the motivated reasoning and cognitive dissonance resolution and all the other things that come into play when people are trying to sort out reality from fantasy. So, why is it that they just can't recognize it? Well, they either are ignorant of the phenomena as a phenomena. They don't even bother trying to find out what's going on. They just think that what happened to them is real. Or they do know about that, but they're absolutely convinced that because they experienced it in the way that they experienced it, it must be real. And therefore, the demon or ghost or alien or whatever that came, well, that's just how it is. So, and the telling thing here, of course, is lack of physical evidence. If you're going to talk about being taken off by aliens in the middle of the evening or being visited by demons or something, well, then maybe there'd be some kind of psychic, residue or the whole ectoplasm thing. Or, if you went off to, maybe if you got dragged out of your house, then maybe there'd be some dirt or some, you know what I'm talking about. There might be some kind of physical evidence. And if there is none at all, well, you can use circular logic to explain why that is and have this little self contained fantasy. Or you can, maybe apply a little critical thinking and think maybe that entire episode just happened all up here and it didn't have any real physical manifestation, or in other words, it didn't really happen. You just imagined it. It's really hard for people to go there, especially when they have super realistic experiences. And especially in sleep states, our brains can be amazing deceivers. I mean, how often have you woken up from a dream in the middle of the night? This has happened to me so many times. And you're just absolutely positive that what was happening to you in your dream that you were just having, nightmare even, was absolutely real, was happening to you in real time. I've woken up sometimes from some nightmares, especially some of the, waking up back in the Sea Org kind of dreams, where I was positive that I was back in the Sea Org, or I was being chased by the monster, or I was shot, or whatever it was that was happening. It felt so real. And, you wake up and I was just like, I'd be like, oh, thank God that was just a dream. Oh my God, like I thought it was all over. I thought my life was ruined. I thought it was the end. It seemed very real. So, you know, and knowing everything I know, when you're in that place, there's no questioning it. So that's kind of why. So it's a mixture of these things, as far as your question goes, Kevin. But it's really something, isn't it? For me, I find it fascinating now because I'm kind of into the neuroscience of it, and I'm just amazed at how we can do that to ourselves. Um, and it's really only very, very recently, that we've started thinking about this whole thing in a very, very different light and stopped lending these hallucinations, the credence of reality. Prior to, scientific enlightenment, psychology, age thinking, those things were real. You didn't question any of that stuff. That was real. Those angels that were visiting you, those demons that were visiting you, that happened. That was as real as this table is real to those people at that time. So, so we're really kind of new on trying to figure out what else is going on there. Anyway, as far as Scientology goes, um, alien abductions or visitation stories. The funny thing about this, and Aaron and I have noted this in the past, is in talking about this particular thing, is it's funny how in Scientology, when somebody started talking that way in auditing sessions, talked about how L. Ron Hubbard had visited them, or aliens, or the Markabians, or whatever, had come by in their sleep, or something like that. They get pushback. They would tend to not be believed. This didn't come up often. This isn't socially discussed that often in the Scientology circles. Um, and I'm talking about official Scientology believing these stories. Scientologists in and amongst themselves, depending on how credulous they are, how deeply indoctrinated they are, and their background and mindset about aliens and visitations and abductions and stuff like that, Um, they might gain some traction, with their Scientology friends, but I never once heard a Scientologist claim to have actually been abducted by aliens. Okay, I should clarify what I'm talking about. I've never heard about a Scientology alien abduction story. What I have heard many times is Scientologists claiming to have awareness of or going exterior and seeing or being aware of aliens visiting the planet or having or manipulating affairs on planet Earth or something like that, right? Like they're having a modern present time awareness of alien presence somehow either hovering in a ship over the church. I heard that, right? I heard a guy one time tell me he was in an auditing session and he sensed that they were being watched and he looked up and the auditor looked up and they both, kind of looked at each other and the guy said, "Aliens, man, they're watching us right now." And the auditor's like, "Yeah, okay, yeah," writing it all down. And the guy's like, "Up, they flipped off. They flickered away. They took off. They sensed us sensing them. Ooh, the aliens are watching us." I mean, I actually had a serious, heartfelt conversation about that exact incident with that Scientologist one time. So those are the kind of conversations that you might have within Scientology about this kind of thing, at least from my experience. And I hope that that is somewhat interesting to you. There you go, Kevin. Thanks for asking.